For much of the entirety of this offseason, many Lions fans have been wondering what exactly the Lions are going to do. Well, now Brad Holmes has just revealed exactly what the game plan has been the entire offseason, and we're going to talk about it. So stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, this offseason has been one that has been, for the lack of a better word or phrase, very much like a roller coaster. Like, there have been moments where, hey, you know what, for like a brief second, it seems like, hey, things are really good, things are okay. And then it's like we go down this just long, things are just terrible, things aren't good, things aren't going in the right direction, whatever the case might be. And it's very much been a very long offseason. I will fully confess to that. But one of the biggest things about this offseason that has definitely been a prevalent topic has been trying to understand, trying to figure out what exactly the Lions are trying to do. What exactly is Holmes trying to do? Why have they made the moves that they've made? Why have they not made the moves that they've made? There has been a lot of speculation, a lot of, various thought processes that have been put out as to what the Lions may or may not be doing. And I will say this. I have tried my best to kind of walk this very thin, very narrow, very fine line of saying, okay, I understand that it's not exactly what Lions fans may want to hear, but what I think the Lions are doing is they're trying to be responsible with what they have so that way they can make sure that they have the ability not only to win now, but to also win into the future. And anybody who's watched me knows that that is exactly the message I have been putting out damn near this entire offseason. And I'll confess it for what it is. It's not exactly made my viewpoints popular, as my views have definitely gone down. But I have maintained the truth because I have believed 100% up until this point that that's exactly what the Lions were doing, regardless of how popular or unpopular it may have been. Well, here's the thing. I got up this morning, probably around, 3:30, because I normally get up relatively early. And I was sitting down, kind of waking up, and I, turned on YouTube, and I saw that this video had been posted by the Lions, and it was talking about Brad Holmes, where he was kind of like answering questions in regards to after the league owners meeting and all this nonsense that was going on. And during the process of this 26, 27, 28 minute video, Brad Holmes kind of laid out, he shared what this offseason has been for the Detroit Lions, for him, for Dan Campbell, for the team, the whole 9 yards. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat there. And as I sat there watching the video, it became very, very clear that what the Lions have been trying to do this year is that this offseason they have been trying to balance the intricately difficult requirements, if you will, of trying to make sure that they can still win now, but at the same time making sure that they have the resources to maintain their current roster success going into the future. Because when we're talking about teams in the NFL, everybody is pretty much gathering themselves into one of two categories. And there's a third category, which is much smaller, but it's definitely there. The first category are the teams that are not doing well, they're rebuilding, and they've literally got all of these resources so that way they can just pump in as much as they can to try and get themselves rebuilt. Okay, that's one group. The other group is the group that has had success for, at this point, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And at this point now it's like, okay, we're maintaining, we're, kind of like retrofitting, we're kind of like refitting tools and things like that, but we're currently in a good spot. And then there's a smaller third group, which is where the Lions are currently at. They have had success for a couple of years, but at the same time, they're now finding themselves in this position where, okay, all the bills are coming due from all of the resources that they pumped in earlier. And now it's like, okay, we're at this kind of tricky juncture where it's like, hey, in order to continue maintaining to win now, we have to continue to make sure we spend, but we spend fiscally responsibly. But at the same time, to maintain the roster going into the future, we can't overspend because we have those bills that are coming due. So, one of the things that I took away from that, 28 some odd minute interview that, Brad Holmes had was that one of the most difficult things, the most difficult processes that the Lions have had to navigate this year is like, unlike years past, where they had salary cap in which they could be like, oh yeah, we can now use this to, retain our current players, sign players to extensions. We can use these draft picks and we can use these smaller contracts to our advantage so that way we can really pump up and build up the roster. Now it's like, okay, we were pumping up the roster. Now we're going to pump on the brakes because it's like, okay, we have to maintain what we're doing while at the same time making sure that we're responsible with what funds we have because we got all these bills that are coming due. And if you actually go back and you watch the interview, Brad Holmes himself said, listen, it's like a college fund. It's like a mortgage. It's like you have these bills that are coming up. You have to pay them. Otherwise, pretty much the debt collector is going to be coming and saying, oh, sorry, you can't pay your bills. Well, this is about to go away. So the Lions are like, hey, we want to continue to win. We want to continue winning right now. But we also need to make sure that we have the finances and the budget available so that way we can pay the guys that are upcoming. And I've talked about this multiple times this season because it's like, hey, you got to pay Kirby, you got to pay Hutch, you got to pay Jamo, you got to pay Gibbs, you got to pay Branch, you got to pay Laporta, you got to pay Campbell. I mean, it's just da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's a domino effect. You've got all these guys that are coming up where you have to pay them, and it's like, dude, you don't have the availability to just go out and be a splash spender at this point. And that was part of what I got from Brad Holmes is he's like, listen, he's like, all this time past, we've been able to kind of go out on vacation and do whatever the Thunder we wanted to. Now we ain't taking no vacations because it's like, hey, we've had our fun. Now it's like, if we want to maintain where we're currently at, now that we've had the dream house, now we got the dream boat, now we got the dream car and all this other nonsense, if we want to maintain keeping that, we have to make sure we budget appropriately. And then that led into another context, another point that Holmes highlighted on, which is maintaining discipline. Being disciplined in how you go about your process. Because again, Brad Holmes, I'm saying this right now, Brad Holmes is a really, really smart dude, not only in how to run a football team, but also very smart and savvy in understanding what fans want. Because I must have heard it at least a couple times during the interview. He's like, listen, I understand what fans want. They want to go out and have the splash signings. They want to go out and have something exciting because, hey, between the playoffs and then the Super Bowl, the free agency period is the first thing of actual player acquisition that happens. So it's really exciting. There's this simmering, boiling effect of where people are just like anxious for news. He's like, I get it. I understand. But it's like, again, we have to be disciplined to ourselves and make sure that we're not spending money needlessly on other things so that way we not only can, again, going back to the fiscal responsibility, have the ability to pay for things we need to this year, but also paying for things in the future. And so it's like, listen, that discipline he's talking about is staying true in essence to themselves. It's like, hey, we're not just going to go out and just get the top-rated guy just because, oh, that's what the fans want. We might believe that that guy might be a great player, but he's not a fit for us. Or even if he is a fit for us and he's a great player, we just don't have the money for it. And again, this all plays within this very, very high tightrope balancing act of saying, hey, we want to make sure we get quality players, but we also still have to pay the players that we currently have. And that's where this whole thing about the college fund and mortgaging because of the young players you currently have with everybody coming up that you have to pay for, it makes it a much more difficult process. It's not like back in 2021, 22, and even 23 really, where it's like, hey, we really hadn't gotten into this effect yet of saying, hey, we've got all these rookies that are coming up that we have to pay just yet. Now that Rooster's kind of coming home to roost, now we're coming to that point where it's like, hey, you've got these contracts that are coming up. You can't just be going out into free agency and dropping 50, 60, 70, 80 million dollars a year because, oh, that's right, you still have all these other guys you have to pay. Which then also kind of brings us into this whole conversation that we've had before about the edge rusher. Because, again, Brad Holmes is a very, very smart individual. He's very well aware about what the fans want. He's like, listen, I understand what the fans want. They want to have another top edge rusher. They want another top splash kind of guy opposite of Hutchinson. But, I mean, Brad Holmes pointed out in just absolutely beautiful clarity. He's like, there are like, what, 4 or 5 top edge rushers in the NFL? And he's like, how many teams are there? There are 32 teams. And since you have at least 2 edge rushers starting on your defense every single game, that means you have 64 starters over 32 teams with only 5 of them that you would call actual top edge rushers, with Hutchinson being one of them. So the way I kind of took that statement was like, listen, fans wanting another top edge rusher, understand that they want it, but it's not going to happen. Because when there's only like 5 guys, maybe even 6 if you really want to push it, it's like, and you've got 64 guys that are starting, and there's 32 teams, to have the ability to have 2 of those guys, that's almost impossible. There's not a single team in the NFL that's got 2 top edge rushers. They may have 1, and the Lions have one of them, but 2 ain't nobody got. And the reason why is because of just how damn expensive they are. And literally, that's what Holmes said. He's like, it's an expensive position. Which comes into the whole conversation of Zadarius Smith. Because that was actually a question that was brought up as far as what actually was the reason, what actually was the causality of why the Lions moved on from Zadarius. Which most people had already kind of figured out, but the reason why the Lions cut Zadarius Smith was that they simply couldn't afford him at the salary that he was being paid. Which I know for a lot of people, they're like, but David, he wasn't making that much. Okay, maybe he wasn't in comparison to other guys, but it's like, listen, again, going back to the fiscal responsibility, going back to making sure you have your money in your budget to be able to pay for all this other nonsense you've got coming up. What the Lions are trying to do is they're trying to make sure they have the funds to be able to say, okay, for the guys that we truly want that might still be external, whether it's free agents, whether it's the draft, whatever the case might be, we want to make sure we have the funds for that. But then we also have to make sure we have the funds for the guys that are upcoming that are due contracts. Now, having said that, there was one huge little tidbit in this conversation that pretty much Brad Holmes made abundantly clear when talking about Zadarius Smith. And was that, yes, while they cut him due to the salary issue, it was not done with any sort of maliciousness. It was an amicable parting, meaning that, hey, Zadarius understood why it was happening. The Lions were like, hey, we would like to keep you, but we can't keep you at this price. And pretty much what Holmes stated was that the Lions have maintained contact with him and his agent. So it's like, hey, the Lions still would like to bring back Zadarius Smith. And the fact that they have maintained contact with him in his camp tells me that the door is still open to potentially having him come back. So think about this, folks. What have I been saying the entire offseason? Yes, the Lions still would like to bring Zadarius Smith back. Yes, they are still interested in bringing him back. The door is still open. And here's the thing, seeing as how nobody, absolutely nobody up until this point has even stated any reasoning about, bringing in Zadarius Smith. And the fact that the Lions were, one of the best teams last year, I'd say the Lions have a leg up on bringing him back. And again, when you understand this whole concept about how difficult it is to balance all of these intricate deals, all of these intricate things, you start to get a much greater appreciation of just how damn hard it is to make all this crap work. I mean, there was another little point within the whole conversation that Brad Holmes had, and he was talking about the cost of the cornerback market, about how the cornerback market, it just ballooned. It just was absolutely ridiculous this year. And it's like, okay, you have fans that want to obviously get a top edge rusher. You also have to now go out and you have to replace, your cornerback because you just lost Carlton Davis on a $60 million deal to go play for the New England Patriots. That's why he's like, dude, when we were able to get, DJ Reed on the deal we were able to get, he's like, I was absolutely ecstatic. He's like, I thought we did great this year in terms of free agency because it's like, hey, when you actually step back and you actually take a look at what Holmes is trying to do, it's like, okay, I have to have funds for this. I have to have funds for that. But I also now have to go out and get a replacement for a cornerback. And I was able to get a guy that actually plays better than Carlton Davis for, $12 million less overall for the same time frame of a deal. It's like, dude, I'd be doing cartwheels and jumping jacks and all that nonsense too. I'd be absolutely just ecstatic. And that was the exact same thought process he was talking about with Levi Onwuzurike. He's like, dude, to get a player of his caliber back, his quality back, after all the, pressures that he was able to put up last year and all the progress he showed last year, to get him to come back on a minimum deal, he's like, dude, I didn't know we were going to make that happen. So it's like, again, what you're seeing here is the Lions putting in the work, being able to make these deals happen within the budget that they've allotted themselves while still being able to maintain the roster that they have so that way they can continue to win now but also win into the future. When you're trying to go in two separate directions and maintain both fronts, it's a very hard thing to do. But if you know what you're doing and if you keep yourself, allotted to within a certain budget, you can make it happen. Is it going to be the most sexy or the most splashy kind of way to do it? Absolutely not, which is why a lot of fans are absolutely frustrated this offseason because it's been like almost nothing's happened. But I can guarantee you this, if you were to go to Allen Park, there's plenty of things that are happening behind those walls. I guarantee you there's plenty of conversations, and I guarantee you there's plenty of plans that have been going on. So, yes, Brad Holmes understands what the fans want, but he's also trying to make it abundantly clear. He's like, listen, while I understand what you want, I also have to maintain my job. I have to be responsible and make sure that not only we can continue to win now, but going into the future. And it might make him the bad guy a couple of times out of whatever, but it's like, listen, which would you rather have? Would you rather have your cake right now and then, not be able to enjoy it years later? Or would you actually rather have a moderate helping now and be able to spread that out over years and years to come? Call me crazy, but I would like to be able to have more than just one helping, so to speak. But anyway, having said all that, I believe I've talked about this. I believe that I have proven the point, so I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. Also encourage you all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage you all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage you all, please, to make sure that you share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Share anywhere and everywhere you possibly possibly can. The more we can do that, the greater the channel can grow and spread. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope you all enjoyed this content. I hope you all were able to gain something from it. I hope you all really were able to have something that you could think on, mull over a little bit. That's truly what I try to do with my content, whether it's the first time you watch me, you guys have been watching me since the very beginning. Also, hope everybody out there has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.